I'm 18 years old and last year I made the biggest change in my life so far. A change that was so dramatic that it made people question if I was okay in the head. And to be honest, it even made me question if I was okay in the head. And this change was ditching my life in the UK to permanently move to Thailand, specifically the capital city, Bangkok. I didn't come here with anyone, not my friends, not even my parents, literally just me and a travel bag that was way too small for how long I was going for. I didn't bring much with me, literally just a couple pairs of clothes, my laptop, camera, and a few chargers. The mindset I had going into this was that I was going to leave everything behind, even my stuff, so anything that wasn't essential was left behind. So I've been living here for a while now, and every month that goes past, I feel more and more attached to this place, and it also feels more and more like home. To be honest, if I actually had to call any place home right now, it would actually be here and not the place that I lived in the UK for my whole life until last year. I've made friends here, I've met a girl, I even know Bangkok more than the city that was closest to me in my hometown. I don't even really need Google Maps to navigate my way around the center. And after being here long term, I'm starting to realize that this was the best decision that I have ever made. And one of the reasons why is that I feel like I have everything I've ever wanted. I've always wanted to be in the big city. I really didn't like the small town that I used to live in the UK. There wasn't enough stuff going on, and the people who lived there had been living there doing the same thing for their whole lives. And that's really not the type of people that I want to be around. I've always liked the warm weather, not the cold weather, and this place is warm, and everyone knows that the UK is cold, grey and rainy. But there are also several other reasons why I wanted to move here, and I've made a few videos on my channel already explaining the reasons why I moved here, so you can go and check out those videos if you want to see more reasons why I moved here and more benefits of living here. So that's enough of me yapping about me and my story. In this video, I actually want to focus on helping you. And if you are a young man or woman and you have had enough of your country, maybe you live in the UK or the US or pretty much any Western country, and if you are looking to start a whole new life in a new place, then I think I have the perfect solution for you. Well, it was definitely the perfect solution for me. And this is moving to Asia. And there are plenty of Asian countries out there which are great to live in. But specifically, I'm going to focus on Thailand in this video because this is the country that I live in and that I have the most knowledge about. And because of the knowledge that I have, I think I'm ready to share with you my full guide of moving to Thailand as a young person. I will also make sure to remove all of the fluff and only share with you the important information to avoid confusing you and wasting your time. So if you are interested in moving here as a young person, then listen up. So let's start at step 1. And this is actually where a lot of people's journeys end. And this step is about money. To move anywhere, you need money. You need money for the flight. You need money for your accommodation and where you're going to stay. You may need money for the visas that you're going to need to purchase to be able to live there legally. And the interesting thing about Thailand is that in a way, the money situation is very good, but in another way, it's also very shit. It's very good because you actually don't need that much money to stay here. You only really need like half or maybe even like a third of the amount of money that you would need to live in the UK. For example, rent I think is probably around a third of the cost, and you really don't need to be a millionaire to live in Thailand, quite obviously. Most people know that Thailand is pretty cheap. It's like, known to be an affordable country. But the shit thing about the money situation here in Thailand is that if something in your financial life goes to shit, let's just say you go bankrupt because your business fails, or I don't know, you spend all of your money, or I don't know, you have like medical costs that you need to pay for. In other countries, and definitely in your own country, you might get some governmental support. I know if you live in the UK or in a lot of European or Western countries. You can claim benefits or, you know, like a welfare system to keep your head above water. Here, the chance that the government actually helps you out financially if you are in financial ruin is the same chance as someone walking through that door right now and giving me $1 million in cash. Literally fucking 0% chance. This is just because at the end of the day, they want your money. They don't necessarily want to give you money, they want to take your money. So if you are completely broke and you don't have a pot to piss in, I would really recommend that you get your money up before thinking about coming here. But what if you're just the average person in a Western country who in fact does have a pot to piss in? It might not be a big one, but you've at least got one. You know, you're not completely flat out broke. Well, you're still in a tough situation financially here as well, because most people in the UK get their money from a full-time job, and their job isn't remote. They have to turn up to a job, or maybe even if they work online, like in the sense that they work remotely, like they work from home and their company pays them, they're still not allowed to leave their own country without having legal and contract issues. Only a small amount of people who work in Western countries have a, you know, actual remote job. So the issue that most people are facing is that, yeah, they might get paid a good amount of money from their job, but they can't make money out here. They have their money tied to a job in their home country. So what are the best options so that you can actually like financially support yourself comfortably out here? The first one is that you try to get a job out here and get employed by a, you know, local Thai company. I don't know if this is the best idea because, you know, most Thai companies would rather employ a local than you, because the locals probably either speaks way better Thai or speaks Thai in general, because most people moving here do not speak Thai, don't even speak a word of it. So why would a Thai company want to employ someone who doesn't speak the local language and also just really isn't like a familiar face? You know, they would rather employ a local. But that doesn't mean you can't either get sponsored in by a Thai company from a Western company. For example, if you are in a field that is in demand over here and they don't have enough workers in that field, then they may look overseas and look at countries like the UK and a lot of countries in Europe to try to like sponsor in Westerners to work for them, and then they'll actually pay you quite a bit of money because you're in demand. Of course, you're going to still get paid less than you would in the West, but also the cost of living is much lower here, so it's really not that bad. And another thing that I forgot to mention is that the other thing that you can do to actually make money remotely here is that, yes, you can in fact still be employed by a Western company. It's just the fact that it's quite hard to get a job where they will be okay with you working remotely, because most companies in the West want to employ another Westerner to work for them. It's the same reason why a Thai company would want to employ a Thai person. It's the thing about the familiar face, it's the thing about being, you know, like a native speaker of the language that they use. But this doesn't mean that you can't find a job like this. You really just need to look for this specifically and just accept the fact that the majority of jobs are not going to let you work remotely, and that you actually need to go and seek this out. So yeah, I almost forgot to mention that one, but that is definitely a valid option, and I know a lot of people who actually do this. The second way you can be in a financially decent situation over here is by having your own remote source of income. And the best way to do this is by having your own business. And you could create a business through something like a marketing agency, or you could, I guess, do drop shipping, or reselling, or, you know, think about what like business models like people recommend online. Like you may have seen Iman Gadzi, Alex Hormozy online, and they talk about how to do this. But you can also do the easier route, which is having a one-person freelancing business. So you're basically providing a service to a client and then they pay you for it. And you know, you don't need employees, you don't really need that much business knowledge. You really just need one high-value skill and then clients who will pay you for that. And if you don't really like the idea of doing the last two methods, the final method that I can think of is one that I personally would really not want to do, but it might fit certain people, and that is that you go home for a couple months or for however long you really need to go home for. You try and make as much money as possible in your Western country. Let's just say you're from, the best case scenario would be somewhere like the US, where you can actually get paid, you know, a lot of money by, I guess, being something like an iron worker, or by, you know, doing something that actually doesn't necessarily, you don't need a long-term contract for. That's the key. You don't want to be tied to a long-term contract, because if you're tied to like a 1-year contract, that means you're going to be sitting there for a year. I doubt you want to do that. So I would recommend going into something that you don't need to sign a long-term contract for, and that you can, you know, work for maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. Save pretty much all of your money, and then you can come out here and make that money last for as long as possible. You wouldn't really be working out here, then you would just be like, I guess, you know, living off your savings, cheapskating, and trying to make that money last for as long as possible. I know a few people who do this, but I don't personally recommend it, because it can just be really annoying to keep jumping lives, going from one like side of the world to the other. You know, if you live in the US and you're coming here, you're literally doing like a 20-hour flight every couple months, or however long you want to come here for, and it's just a bit of a pain. And I can't imagine myself doing that. I'm considering making a video showing you guys how you can make remote money as soon as possible. So let me know if that is something that you would like to see. Assuming that you have step 1 sorted out and you aren't in a financial pile of shit, and you are either on your way to making a remote income source, or that you already have one, or you are prepared to do one of the other 2 methods like getting a job here, you can then move on to step 2, which is actually working out where you want to stay. As I said earlier, there are many great places to live in Asia, but if you would like to move to Thailand like I did, then I have a few great recommendations for you. If you want to live on a tropical island, you know, live on the beach, that kind of stuff, then I would recommend Koh Samui, Krabi, and even though it's not an island, Pattaya. But you have to watch out with Pattaya, because a lot of funny business goes on over there. And if you want to live in a beachy place, I have a really good piece of advice for you, and that is, don't just focus on how close your apartment is or your room is to the beach, or how cool it's going to look on your Instagram when you are right next to the beach. Don't focus on these things, because these things are pretty short-lived and they aren't actually what really matters in the long run. What matters in the long run is the actual, you know, how livable your place is and how practical it is to work or live in for. And if you are someone who is trying to make money online or trying to work and focus on something, then things like Wi-Fi and, you know, like how practical your place is to work in is actually a lot more important, as well as how close your room or apartment is to a main road, or how close it is to a town, or how close it is to shops. Because if you make the mistake of, you know, just getting a place right next to the beach and you don't actually think about the other things, then you might end up in a situation like I was in, which was basically I was staying on an island. I didn't know this, but my place was so far from civilization and from everything else, because I was right on the beach, that I would have to walk like 20 minutes just to go to a 7-Eleven to get my milk. I would have to go so far and walk through a jungle literally just to get anything. And because it wasn't near a main road, I couldn't even order a taxi or get on a bus, because, you know, I had to literally trek through the jungle literally just to get anywhere. And the reason why a lot of places are like this is because a lot of these islands are built for tourists and honeymooners, I guess you could say, you know, people that are wanting to just like sit there and, you know, eat at restaurants, and they don't want to buy groceries. They don't really care about, you know, how fast their Wi-Fi is. They just want to be right on the beach, which means if you go into one of these places, you might find out that it's actually very impractical to live there long term. So it's very important that you also consider how livable and practical your place is, and don't just focus on the material things like, you know, how cool it looks on Instagram. But what if you don't actually want to live on the beach and you would rather live in a modern city with all of the amenities that you would have back home? And this is what I personally wanted and what I like. And for me, there was one clear winner, and that is Bangkok. Bangkok is a great place to live in, because this place is not just a great city with, you know, modern amenities and literally everything you would need. It's also just a great place to work, because despite the party districts that make Bangkok one of the party capitals of the world, there are also huge residential areas where you can, focus and be surrounded by like-minded, successful, hardworking people, because this city is like a bit of a business city as well as a party city. There's a lot of people here who are, focusing on work, and it's not just, a tourist place. There's also loads of locals here who live here and work here. So you can surround yourself with this if you want to be focusing and you want to, have a calm working environment. But if you also want the party life, you can just get on a train and go over there. Or you can even live in the party districts themselves. So you can have both the party life and the focused work life. And that's what makes Bangkok so great, is it has the best of both worlds. I personally think that Bangkok is the best place to live in Thailand, but it does depend on what you want as a person. For example, if you're more interested in beaches and nature, then I don't think you'd like it here, because even though you can drive to a beach in around an hour and there are national parks like, an hour or two away from the city, there isn't a huge amount of nature apart from just a couple parks, and there is no beach connected to Bangkok. So if you're more interested in that stuff, then I don't think this place would be right for you, and you should look at going somewhere else. For example, one of the islands. Or maybe if you're interested in more nature stuff, then you could have a look at Chiang Mai or, Chiang Rai, or one of the more nature parts of Thailand. After deciding where you want to stay, you need to move on to step 3, which is turning this dream into an actual reality. And you can do this by booking your flight and your accommodation. When it comes to the flight, if you are coming from a Western country like the UK, or a country in Europe, or even worse, America, your flight can be a huge expense. And if you are someone who, you don't want to spend that much money and you don't want to spend loads on a flight, then you can actually cheap out on the flight to save money, and you can get flights that are genuinely half the price, or even sometimes a third of the price of the normal flights that most people get. You see, there's really 3 types of flights. There are, the luxury normal flights that most people take. They're not really luxury, but they kind of claim to be. You got your Emirates, Thai Airways, British Airways, Qatar Airways, these kind of airlines. And these tend to be pretty expensive. And if you're going at certain times of the year, a single flight can genuinely cost over $1,000 for just one single flight. And for a lot of people, this can be a big expense. So if you want to save money, you can take the other 2 types of flights, which are the mid-range airlines that aren't terrible and they aren't really bad, but they're like, they're not so good and not so well known as the famous ones, but you're saving a lot of money by taking these flights. And the third one, which is the cheapest way to do it, is you take airlines which aren't very famous, aren't that well known, especially by Westerners. They may be known in another country, but you've got a lot of Chinese airlines that they haven't got amazing reviews, but they are so much cheaper than the top airlines. And you can also save even more money by just like sitting in an airport and, having long stopovers, which I did one time. And I will say it's pretty painful, but if you're saving, like $1,000, it probably is pretty worth it if you're someone who, doesn't have that much saved up. But whatever you do, don't take stupid, unrealistic flights like I did one time. One time I took a really cheap flight because I was traveling at an expensive time of year, and the single flights with the fancy airlines were really, really expensive, like weirdly expensive. They were more expensive than they normally are. And so I was looking at the more budget airlines and the more budget flights, and I took like a Turkish flight, and there was a very small amount of time between the 2 connecting flights, and I had to change airport. And if nothing went wrong, I could have made the 2 flights and, got there in time. But the issue is that I had to change airport, but unfortunately my first flight got delayed, and because they're not the same airline, I missed my other flight and I wasted hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and I ended up getting stranded in Istanbul overnight. So whatever you do, don't go crazy with it and get some ridiculously cheap flight just to save some money and end up getting stranded in a foreign country like I did. When it comes to the accommodation, what I would recommend that you do is for the first couple of months before you are like certain that you want to stay here long term, I would recommend that you rent with Airbnb or Booking.com or any sort of like short-term booking website. Because if you rent long-term like a local, you will be tied to a 6-month or actually most of the time 1 to 2 year contract. And, this isn't great if you're not sure if you want to stay here long term or not and you're just getting here. So I'd recommend going with something like Airbnb, renting for, around a month. Because the thing is about Thailand Airbnb is that a lot of the residential condos here, it's actually illegal to rent them for less than 1 month. And unfortunately, the best places are these residential condos. It's the skyscraper apartments. These are like the best to live in normally. And the issue with these is that, yeah, you can't rent them for less than 1 month. So if you want to stay in these really fancy skyscraper apartments, then I'd recommend booking for at least 1 month. So, and then you aren't breaking the law. And if you really don't want to do that and you want to, I don't know, book for a week at a time or 2 weeks because you're really not sure if you want to stay in somewhere for a month, then I'd recommend that you just get a normal hotel. One piece of advice I would give you when it comes to renting apartments is try to rent nearer to the center. I wouldn't recommend renting on the outskirts, and the issue is that even though you'll be saving quite a bit of money, the quality of life on the outskirts of Bangkok really is nowhere near as good as the quality of life in the center. And that is because Thailand's invested all of its money really into like the center parts of the city. And you will most likely not get that first world lifestyle that I'm guessing that you would like if you rent on the outskirts, whereas you can get a pretty much as good of a life as you could get in any other city in the West if you rent in the center. And this is because the condos in the center are great. The center is oftentimes very clean. There's loads of trains in the center. There's loads of things to do. It's just your quality of life in the center is going to be most likely a lot better than if you live on the outskirts. If you aren't sure where you actually want to stay in the center, one thing I did when I wasn't sure is I rented an Airbnb for 1 month in each part of the center that I thought was going to be nice. So I searched up, like the best areas to stay in. I tried actually staying in a few of them. And after doing this a few times, I now know exactly where I like. And even though I didn't like one of the areas that I stayed in, because I was only there short term for a month, it really wasn't a big deal. And then I'm just not going to stay in that area again. And because I've done this a few times, I now know the exact areas that I want to stay in and the exact areas that are perfect for me. So that is something you could do if you're not sure about where you want to stay. I'm going to end this video by saying this: even if you get scared and you get anxiety about doing this, if you do not like where you live, there is nothing worse than staying there, because staying there will slowly suck away your motivation and your energy, and every day that you stay, it will be harder to leave, and you will feel more and more anxious and more connected to this place. And even if you don't like it, your brain, the longer you stay, will be more and more scared about moving. So really, if you don't like where you're staying, you really should leave. Even if you have friends and family, it's not worth staying in a place that you hate staying in. I remember I spent years in a place in the UK which I didn't like being, and it really just drained me mentally to stay there because, I woke up every day and I just didn't want to be there. And I know a lot of people feel the same way. So it's really not worth just staying there and continuing to not make a change. So endure the fear and do whatever it takes to move somewhere that you actually want to be in and that you love waking up in every day and that gives you energy, because I promise you that it is 100% worth moving to a place that makes you feel like this. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I will see you in my next video.